All right, there we go. Take two. Well, again, I want to thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm sure you're a busy man, especially with your new book about to come out.
Well, I've got a little bit of time. Like I think it's like May 28th, I think it is. But they just dropped all of the let's see, what is it? The flights and the rental cars and the hotels and everything like that. What they generally do is they'll give me a long list of all of those basic aspects of the tour, and they'll give me what they think I should do. Like but they're actually pretty great about it because they'll allow me to make the final choice about like when it is that I want to fly, or you
Yes,
know
sir.
the rental cars or the hotels or all that type of thing like that. So it's kind of a busy time for that right now like that. But I don't go out on the road until May 28th like that. So I
Yes,
think,
sir.
but
Yeah.
thank you, Austin. I appreciate
Not a
it.
problem. Not a problem. Well, and for those that are going to be watching this, this is Mr. Craig Johnson, author of the Longmire mystery series. Book 20 is coming out next, and well, I guess it's technically April at this point in May, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Not a problem. So I got a few just general questions. I'm sure you've probably been asked a million times over. Where did you come up with the idea for this series or the characters, I guess, to begin with?
When I first started out like that, what it basically was that it was like more than 20 years ago. Everything that it seemed like in crime fiction was all very noir. It was all very gritty, urban settings, with alcoholic detectives burying bodies in their backyards and all of this. And I just thought, most of the people I know in law enforcement, they're very good people and work very hard like that. And so I thought, maybe if you do something a little bit different. And so I thought, well, maybe how about like the sheriff of the least populated county in the least populated state, which is where I sit right now,
Yes,
Wyoming.
sir.
And so that was how Walt kind of came to be like that. And it makes for like a very different kind of environment, I think, for crime fiction, very different types of crimes for them to contend with, and it just made more sense to me to try and do something a little bit different than what everybody else seemed to be doing. The fact that we're like so close to the proximity. I mean, my ranch is right here on the border, the northern border of Wyoming, pushed up against Montana at the base of the Bighorn Mountains. But just to the north is the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation and the Crow Reservation, like that. And so it just seemed to me that there were some real opportunities to maybe do something a little bit different with a contemporary Western. Not that that hadn't been ever done before. I mean, obviously, the one that I mentioned always, who came before me, was Tony Hillerman. Writing about the Navajo like that, and down in the Southwest and everything. But as far as I could tell, no one had done something like that, the comparison contrast between the two cultures and everything here in the upper high plains, like in the northern high
Okay.
plains. And I thought maybe that might be something a little bit different, a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it's funny you say you're near the reservation. I've heard before that you based Henry Standing Bear, who I'm going to be upfront and honest with you, who's my favorite character in the series. I'm sure he is most. I thought I heard at one point that you had based him off of a friend of yours, or loosely at least.
I did. I did. Well, I quote it all the time, but my favorite quote about writing is from Wallace Stegner, who was that marvelous instructor at Stanford University. And in one of his little books, it was called "On Writing and Teaching Fiction." Is he said the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. You know what a crock that is. I mean, that's your job, to go find interesting people like that and use them as characters in your books like that. And so it's a lot easier for me, to be, on point, as far as a different culture is concerned, if I'm actually using the people that I know, from that culture like that. And so I enjoy writing about the Northern Cheyenne and the Crow, but I'm neither Northern Cheyenne nor Crow. And so it's kind of important that I make sure that I get those things right. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is to take my neighbors and friends and practically family members and utilize them as characters in the books. And so I can go down the list almost of all the characters, that certainly the native characters that are in the books, and actually tell you, who their doppelganger is. Who else it might be like that's a character in the books. Marcus Red Thunder like it is Henry Standing Bear. Let's see, Mandy Smoker Broadus is Dina Minicamps. Charles White Man is Lonnie Little Bird, like that. Lonnie Pretty on Top, like it. I can go on and on and on like that with all of the characters. But that's one of the joys of it, is to when you write these type of books, like to have that, to draw from very easily. I mean, I don't ever have to think about what those characters are going to say or how they're going to say it. I know exactly what they're going to say and how they're going to say it. And so it makes the job a little easier, I have to admit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I just finished book 10 this morning. And so I'm sure I don't want to keep you from not being able to talk about the other books later in the series and whatnot. But book number 3, you take Walt, you take Henry Standing Bear to Philadelphia. uh I got to tell you the story. So I started reading your books back in September. My wife and my family and me went on a cruise, and I took the first 4 books on my Kindle to read. And by about book halfway through book 1, especially book 2 and 3, I couldn't put it down. My wife was making fun of me. She's like, we're in Cozumel, we're in the Caribbean, we're down here, and all you want to do is read. So, and I think that goes to show, how enthralling your books are. But my thing with book number 3 is, it takes Henry and it takes Walt a little bit out of their element. Are there any books, later on in the series that, are out of the state? I know we go out of, the next state over, the next county. Are there any books that, have come out or are going to come out, you think, in the future where, we're not necessarily in that region, we're in a different, state or a different country or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's one of the joys like that. I mean, yeah, the third book, actually took Walt, to Philadelphia. The fourth book, half of it takes place in Vietnam in 1968. And so that's one of the joys, I think, of like doing these type of books is that, you don't have to stay within that chronology. It's not like like human existence. Like you can't just like go from, one, moment to the next moment to the next moment. I mean, you
Yes,
have the
sir.
opportunity to be able to drop back in time, to to change location a great deal like that. And I think that a lot of times that's a little bit more revealing about the characters in many ways. I mean, the idea of a Western character, a cowboy, in the West is one thing like that, but having him in the sixth largest, city in the United States back east, that's something a little bit different. And not that it hasn't been done before like that, but you always attempt to try and do something a little bit different than the way that it's been done before. And then of course, as far as the time is concerned like that, I mean, it's very interesting to go back, because in Another Man's Moccasins, Walt kind of like is reminiscent of this crime that's taken place is very reminiscent of the first homicide investigation he was involved with in Vietnam in 1968. And so, it was important to go back and see what had happened in that particular case. And for me, it's always going to be more interesting if we go back to that period in time and we're there and we're seeing what happened and everything,
Yes,
rather
sir.
than just having them tell stories about it or something like that. That's very kind of flat. You're not really, in the dynamic and in the energy, as far as that's concerned. So for me, it's very important to have the opportunity to go back and do that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. Well, I got a list of questions here for you. My next question is obviously, you have a 20 book series going on, but Longmire was turned into a TV show. How did that process come about as far as, did they approach you? Did you approach them or?
No, no, the books had actually made it on the New York Times bestsellers list by the time Warner Brothers got in touch with me like that. And I don't know. I mean, I think that what it came down to, what they told me, the story is that it was a situation where they were looking for characters. That's what they were looking for, and a lot of times that's just what Hollywood is looking for. Like that, a lot of people worry about the details of what it is they're doing or how they're going to do it or all of that. A lot of time, what it really has to come down to is really strong characters. And the way that they felt about the books is that they had very unique and very strong characters that they could, not only use the plots that I had, because I at that point in time I think I only had like 7 books. And so, what they needed, and my gosh, they'll go through, 7 plots, in one, in 1 month, for goodness sake, like it. And so they need to be able to have that as a jumping off point, to be able to go in a lot of different directions, but have that really strong sense of character. And so, Warner Brothers came knocking on the door and said, "Hey, we'd like to make a television show, out of your books." and and it was extraordinarily popular. I was amazed by it. They did an amazing job, I think, with the casting and with the writing and a lot of the information that went along, with the books. Um, and then we were extraordinarily popular there. We were the highest rated scripted drama in A&E's history, but then A&E decided they wanted to buy the show from Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers wouldn't sell it, and so they canceled the show like that, which was an unfortunate thing for them to do, for a show that was pulling in close to 6 to 7 thousand million people a night. And then it got picked up by Netflix, and we were on Netflix and extraordinarily popular for about 3 years, 3 seasons like that. And then, of course, what happened is Netflix tried to buy it from Warner Brothers too, because the broadcasters can make a lot more money off of a show if they actually own it. That way they don't have to lease it,
Yes,
from the
sir.
studio. And once again, Warner Brothers said, well, we're not going to sell Longmire, sorry. And so they didn't like that, but at least Netflix was a little more gracious about it and said, hey, we're going to finish up with 6 seasons like that, and that'll be the end of it. Well, I can't help but think that they, in the back of their minds, both Warner Brothers and certainly Netflix, what they thought would happen was, we got this little Indian cowboy show. It's doing really well in the ratings now, but here in about a year or two, like that, it'll die down without new episodes, like that, and that'll be the end of it. And then we'll just quietly take it off the air, and that'll be the end of it. Well, that was about 7 years ago, and the show is still one of the top 10 to 20 shows on Netflix every other week. And I don't know, it's interesting to me like that, because people go back and they watch it over and over and over again like that, and that's very flattering. Like it's the same kind of flattering quality that I have whenever people read the books over and over and over again. I love the fact that people say the most wonderful thing you can say to an author is, I went back and I reread your book, is what I did. That's very gratifying. When you work a whole year to try and produce something like that, you hate to think that it's like popcorn. It's like, what's next? It's kind of nice to have people say, yeah, I kind of went back and I've reread that book about 3 or 4 times actually, and that's very gratifying.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, and I think that's one thing. I mean, I'm in my mid 20s, but I'm not gonna lie. I love Louis L'Amour books. I mean, while they're not the most, dense books by any means, I can sit down and I can, enjoy it. And I think I feel that connection with your books as far as I'm able to sit down. I mean, yeah, are there some scenes that are a little gruff every now and then? Yeah, but you know what? It is a series I definitely wouldn't mind going back and rereading. I was actually talking to my wife yesterday because I need to get the rest of your books on my Kindle. And I told her, I said, I think I'm going to go on. So I started looking, try to find them in hardcover. I'm not a huge hardcover fan, but if I find a series I absolutely love or a book, I want to buy them in hardcover. And I seen that, was looking on your website and I see that you have a whole ton of, coffee mugs, hats. I mean, you have your own, books that you can buy on there that you get signed. I think that's awesome because as someone like me, again, who when you find something, a series you love, and you go back and reread it, I think it's awesome, to be able to get, a book signed or something, especially if you have that one particular one that you love. But again, you have, this TV show, like you said, that's on Netflix, that's still one of the most popular shows on there. You have a, successful, book series. I like you said, you live, northern Wyoming. Are you kind of like a local celebrity over there in your town, or
I
do you have an
don't
issue
know. That could
going
go
to the
either
local
way. Like,
Walmart or whatever it is that y'all have?
I don't know. The bar for celebrity in Ucross, Wyoming, population 26, is extraordinarily low. Like I gotta admit, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do a lot of I do all of the libraries in Wyoming. I do library events all over the state, and I don't charge any kind of an honoraria or anything like that. And so I think people kind of respond to that like that. And then of course we've got Longmire days that we have here, in Buffalo, which is the town about 28 miles in this direction. It's about a 4,000 person town, and we get the actors, to come up like that, and they bring about 12 or 15,000 of their closest friends like it, and so it's kind of a big event. It's one of the bigger events here in Wyoming, and it's kind of nice to have that like that, and the T-shirts and the mugs and the posters and all that, and the bumper stickers and all that. They're kind of a side effect. They're kind of a side product, of all of that tourism like that happens like that. But it is kind of nice, because if you find a world, that you want to be a part of, whether it's movies or television shows or, a series of books, um, it's kind of nice like that to be able to have a coffee mug, from the Absaroka County Sheriff's Department, or a ball cap, or something like that. It kind of makes you feel as though you're part of that world like that. And I want that. I want readers to feel like, they've fallen into that world. The way that I write the books, many times the way I've described it is that, when somebody picks up one of my books and starts reading them, I don't really want them to remember that they're even reading a book. I want them to fall into that world, so that it's almost as if, they were to go in and sit down at the Busy Bee Cafe, there on the main street of Durant, like that, and Walt Longmire were to come in and sit down next to them and say, "Hi, let me tell you about what happened to me last month." At that point, I don't want them to even remember that they're reading a book. I want them to be in that world with those characters at that point in time, just completely submersed, in that world.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, I can definitely say that that's happened to me more often than not. Like I said, on a cruise, that's all I could think about. And I'm going to skip ahead in some of my questions here because book nine, the ending of book nine, when I read it, I mean, I don't want to say it wrecked me, but it caught me off guard and I had to stop. I remember I was reading it and I had to stop and say, okay, you know what? These are fictional characters,
Uh-oh.
again, it took me by surprise. And I think that's what made me love and, fall in love with this series even more is like you said, you feel like you're living it, like you're right there next to Walt or
Uh-huh.
Henry or Vic. And so I commend you on that because again, this series, like I said, while the books may not be the longest, and I think that's the only complaint I have about the books. And it's a nitpick is I want them to be longer. I want an 800 tome of me just sitting there. I don't care if it's just Henry and Walt talking. I just want to be able to sit there for 800 pages and just hear their banter.
Well, it's kind of nice. Like they give me like a lot of leeway. Like, but I have to laugh like at when you say that because when I wrote the first novel, when I wrote The Cold Dish, it I really didn't know, what the standard length was, for a lot of like, things like crime fiction novels or anything like that. And so the first, draft of The Cold Dish was actually over 600 pages long. It was, I euphemistically refer to it as like War and Peace in Absaroka County was what it was like that. And, the first thing that my agent, when she picked me up was that she said was, you're going to have to cut like 200 pages out of this thing like that. And she said, "Do you want me to do it?" And I said, "No, no, no, that's mine like that. I'll cut the 200 pages out of it." And I think that was a little bit of a test in many ways, like to see if I could take constructive criticism like that and see if I could actually do something, that I was told, that needed to be done. And it became a much better book, to be honest, like that. The Cold Issue, tightened it up, it focused it, it did a lot of things, and I learned a lot, by cutting those 200 pages out of there like that. But I'll be honest with you, I don't pay much attention, whenever I hear writers get together and they start talking about word counts or page counts or anything like that. I don't pay any attention to that at all. I just write the story, and see where it ends up like that, and if it's a little long, then I'll have to, pull it back. Generally, they're a little long. I don't think I've ever had a book that turned out to be shorter, than what it was supposed to be, other than like the novellas that I've done. And that I wrote them specifically to be a little bit shorter. There was Spirit of Steamboat, I think, was the first one that I wrote. And I remember sitting down and writing the outline for that book and thinking, okay, this is not a novel. This is not a 350 page novel or 400-page novel. This is, something a little bit shorter. Like it's kind of hitting the ground running like that, and goes very very fast. And I thought let's try and do something a little bit shorter like that. And so that one was, I think, I don't know, something like 150 pages long like that. And I had no, I had I was not tempted at all, to try and pad it out, to try and make it into, a full length novel. I liked it the way it was, the novella. And then I had another idea about 5 years later, like that was called The Highwayman. And that was another one that, I thought, this is, this is another one of those novella ideas, kind of hits the ground running like that. And so I'll write that one up. And it was like about, I don't know, I think about 160 pages or 170 pages. And so then I here just recently finished another one that'll be coming out in November, which is called Tooth and Claw. And it's coming a little bit closer to 200 pages like that. So I really, I don't pay any attention at all to how long they are. I just write them and see where they go.
Well, that kind of leads into another question I have. When you sit down, for your short story collections or your novellas, do you? I guess you kind of just answered it as far as if you have it planned out, or if you have, kind of just something that comes to mind. Because I've been trying. I found a website that had in publication order how your books came out, so that's how I've been reading them.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so, I mean, you had I mean, I've read Steamboat, Spirit of Steamboat. You had another one that I read, and I was just kind of wondering, like, does he actually sit down and think, okay, you know what, let's come up with 5 short stories and kind of pen them out, or do you just, kind of pick them up over time, or like, you know what, we could probably make a short story collection out of these, five or whatnot.
That actually happened. The short stories is kind of a relatively interesting, way that evolved. What happened was is there was a short story contest in Cowboys and Indians magazine, and my wife, slid the copy of Cowboys and Indians magazine under my coffee mug one morning and said, "You should do that." And only those of us who've been married for a certain amount of time know how easy it is to completely ignore the phrase "you should do that." Like, and so it was a call for submissions to the Tony Hillerman Cowboys and Indians magazine short story mystery contest. I swear the title was longer than some of the submissions. I'm pretty sure like that. But anyway, she slid that under there and she said, "You should do that. That would be that'd be really good. It'd give you a lot of, a lot of exposure and everything." And I was like, I've never written a short story, so I wouldn't know where to start. Well, then I went down to the barn, and of course I'm shoveling out the barn, and anybody that's ever done that kind of work knows how much free time you have in your head, and so I started thinking about it and I thought, well, if you were to write a short story, what would you write it about? What would you do? Like, and so I had this idea and I came back up and I wrote the short story and it won. Amazingly enough, it won the Tony Hillerman Award. Like that, I got to go have dinner with Tony. I learned a lot in about 4 hours of having dinner with him. And I had this short story that got published in Cowboys and Indians magazine. Well, there's nothing more useless to an author than a previously published short story, like, because there's nothing you can do with it. Basically, it's already been published, so you can't really go and submit it anywhere else, and nobody wants to publish, a thin, it'd be a very thin 12-page, publication if they tried to put it out there like that. And so it was kind of useless to me. And so then what happened was it got to be around Christmas the next year. And I thought, what would be cool would be to send that short story out to everybody that's on my post-it list, off of my website, craigallenjohnson.com, and send that thing out to everybody on Christmas morning and just have it be in their inbox, one morning. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? And everybody loved it. Everybody got a big charge out of it. And then the next Christmas rolled around and I got surprised by people writing me and going, "When do we get the Walt Longmire Christmas story this year?" And I was like, "Oh crap, I haven't written one like that." And so I had to sit down really quick like that and write another one like that. And it kind of became tradition like that. So I would go around all the libraries here in about a 3-county area here and do a Christmas show like that, where I would read the short story in some museums and places like that. And it was fun. I had a really good time doing it. There was music and all of that. Like, and so it kind of became a tradition. So after I got about 13, like a baker's dozen of the short stories done, I approached Viking Penguin and they said, well, we don't know. I mean, unless you're, Bill Clinton or Tom Hanks or something like that, it's kind of hard to sell, a collection of short stories. And I was like, well, I mean, I've got, a number of books on the New York Times bestsellers list. I mean, we should try it, at least see what happens. And so they put that first one out, Wait for Signs, and it actually made the New York Times bestsellers list, believe it or not, like that. And now I think I'm about 12 or 13 stories since the last collection, last anthology of short stories. So probably next year, we'll have another anthology of short
Okay,
stories.
okay. Well, and like you said, you tour, you go around your local area. I know I live in West Texas over here in the Lubbock area, so we get wind and all that. I know you were just recently in Fort Worth in the fall, I believe. You received an award if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I was. I won the Will Rogers Award. I can't remember what it is. Is it the Lariat Award, like Life Achievement Award or something? I don't think it's a Life Achievement Award, but a Body of Work Award, I think is what it was. Like anytime you can have your name connected to Will Rogers, I'll take that anytime I get the
Yes,
chance.
sir.
So,
What did you think of glorious Fort Worth and the stockyards and all that? I'm assuming you've probably been there before,
oh, I
hopefully.
have. I have. I've been there
Yeah.
for the Western Writers Association and a bunch of others. Like, I mean, the stockyards over there is a spectacular. That's the fun part, as far as I'm concerned. Look at being able to go over there. But yeah, I mean, and I do a lot of like events in Texas. Like, people really really love the books. I actually did the Texas Sheriff's Association meeting one year. Like, they invited me to come down and do the Texas Sheriff's Association meeting, and I thought, okay, well, you know what, I guess Texas is a little bit bigger than Wyoming, like it, and so we got 23 counties, like that. So what they got, 50, 75, something like that. Do you know there are more than 250 counties in Texas? Are you aware of that? Like,
You joke, but my boss has a giant picture of Texas with all the different counties, and I'm gonna have to sit there and count them tomorrow just to make sure that's true. But well, that is awesome. Next time you come through to Texas, I'm definitely gonna have to make sure I come out and meet you and get a signature and all that. Like I said, I really do appreciate you coming on here and whatnot. One question I did have, the big show here about the West that's kind of come out, in the last few years was Yellowstone. So
uh,
I'm just curious, do you think, are you a fan of the show? Do you like kind of how they, bring up the issues that are on the reservation? I know reservation and the Native Americans are, near and dear to you. Do you feel like
mhm.
that show has brought that more to light as far as that goes, or
It's difficult for me to say, and certainly difficult for me to give an
if you
opinion
don't
on
want
other
to answer
people's
that, fine.
works.
Like I said,
But for me, like, because I haven't ever seen it, I have to admit that I haven't seen the television show. It's kind of funny, like that, because I get asked that type of question a lot of the time. People will ask me, "Well, have you seen this show? Have you seen that show?" And I'm like, "I'm lucky I saw our show." Like, for goodness sake, like, so I just don't watch that much television, and I don't watch that many movies. Which kind of gets me into trouble sometimes, like that, because I mean, there's a zeitgeist of information out there, from Hollywood and everything, and so people kind of expect you to understand and know about all that kind of stuff. But I have to admit that I really don't with that. And
okay.
even whenever they were doing the casting, I mean, I thought I dodged a bullet, but they actually sent me DVDs, for the casting for Longmire. And they asked me, they said, "Well, do you ever think about actors whenever you think about, the characters in your books?" And I said, "No, no, I've got people I know, friends and family and people I work with. Look at, and those are the people that I put in my books." And that was really no help to them. Well, they said, "Well, when you do think, do you ever, if you were to think of actors for Walt Longmire, who would you think of?" Like that. And I said, "Well, um, Joel McRae would have been a good Walt Longmire. Ben Johnson would have been a good. Gary Cooper would be a really good Walt Longmire." And they said that was no help at all because all those guys have been dead for at least 50 years. Like it, and so I wasn't really much help as far as that kind of thing is concerned. But yeah, I feel like there are a number of shows that have kind of popped up here in the last like 10 years, and they're all kind of contemporary Western shows. And I feel like, we kind of, broke some ground for a lot of those, like that, made it possible for people to think about, the potential of actually doing some Westerns again. I mean, that's one of the things for me that, that I always take into consideration. Whenever I'm speaking, to the Western Writers Association, and kind of invoke the name that you did earlier, Louis L'Amour and everything, I'm always, telling an awful lot of the writers there like that, well, you know, you don't want to be out there trying to rewrite Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey, because Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey were pretty good at writing Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey. Like that. So, you might want to think about trying to do something different. You might want to think about trying something that, goes in a little bit of a different direction like that. And that's kind of why it was that I thought maybe a contemporary Western would be, interesting to see because it uses a lot of the same iconoclastic imagery and the tropes, and certainly the same environs and even peoples like that, but it just moves them up into the modern era. And I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that, like, my goodness, I mean, the amount of dramatic conflict and all the things that are going on in the contemporary American West, certainly rivals everything that was going on in what was referred to as the Wild West, in the 1880s and all of that. And so, for me, it's always a situation where you're trying to look and see, okay, well, let's try and do something a little bit different. And then, as far as your comment, as far as the idea of contemporary issues and problems and all of that, that's kind of the lifeblood of what it is that I do. I mean, just about every single book that I've written has been based off of some kind of a newspaper article or something. And I think what that does is it keeps the books really kind of grounded, in the reality of the world in which I live. I think that if you're gonna write about a place that you love, the one thing that it demands is honesty. And I don't know. I think there's an awful lot of stuff that's out there, and certainly about our part of the world like that isn't particularly honest. It isn't an honest portrayal, not only of the issues that we're dealing with, but even the characters, the people and who we are. The books are really popular overseas, very popular in Europe. And I ask, a lot of the European publishers and European readers, I'll say, why is it that you guys like the book so much? And they continually what they say is it seems real. It seems like the characters are real, the situations are real. It's not just all made up, to just try and make some sort of hyperbolic kind of situation or highly dramatized or ridiculous kind of situation where that would never really happen in our part of the world. And to me, that's very gratifying to think that that honesty is one of the things that tries to, to get the stories and the characters across.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm about out of my questions that I had prepared with me. One other, I'm sure this is another question you get asked all the time. What if you have a favorite book in the series that you've written, thus far? Which one is it?
The one I'm working on right now. That's always the case ever since
That's
book
always the
one.
case.
Though it's not even a smart aleck answer. It's just an honest answer, is what it is. Whenever you're writing a book, you're so submersed in that world, and with those characters at that period of time that the other books, it's almost like they don't even exist. They've all they are is just leading up to this moment that you're writing today. I got to write a really fun scene, and a really dramatic scene where Walt has this kind of conflictive situation with the governor of Wyoming, like that, and it was a blast of a scene to write. Putting it together and seeing what it was they had to say to each other, what they wanted from each other, like that, and where it was going to go, like that, as I was writing it, and I just had a blast. I mean, that's the best thing about doing what it is that I do. I mean, I hate to fall back on like those old tropes, those old sayings, but the old statement that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I kind of feel like that's the life that I'm leading right now.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. Again, I really do appreciate you coming on here. And again, that you said May, correct, is when the next book comes out.
It is First Frost is the name of the book. Like, and it's
Okay.
interesting because you asked that question about the different places, like at different time periods. It happens right in 1964 when Walt and Henry graduate from college and lose their deferment and get an invitation from the federal government for a all expense paid trip to sunny Southeast Asia and a little known country at that time called Vietnam. And so they have to go on this big cross country epic road trip because Henry has to report to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and Walt has to report to Parris Island off South Carolina. And so that leads them onto this big epic road trip across the United States in 1964. Well, what road are you going to take in 1964? You're going to go on Route 66 is what you're going to do.
Yes,
And
sir.
so here they are. They're like 22 years old, like at their whole lives, are changing. They're going through some major changes in their lives and the direction and trajectory of their lives, like that. And it's kind of the first frost of their lives to see what it is that's going to happen to it, like that. But yeah, First Frost will be out on May 28th, and I'll be out on the highways of America, just about everywhere.
Well, we I know us fans cannot wait to get another Longmire, book in the series. Like I said, I'm only 11 books in the series now. I can't wait, to get to that one and read it though. It definitely sounds like I'm going to enjoy it. Again,
I'm not
I hope.
worried, Austin. You'll catch up with me. I'm not worried about it. Like, and then you'll
Well,
be like,
I
well,
do.
Greg, where's the next book? Come on.
Yes, sir. Well, that's the hard thing. When I found when I find a series that I love, and it's still ongoing, which is not a bad thing. But then you catch up, and you got to wait a year or two for the next one to come out. But with you having the Christmas story coming out, in December, whatnot, at least you give us fans something, a little nibble just to kind of get us by for the next year. Even if we go back and reread it, if it's a 20-page, short story, that's something. And I know all of us do appreciate that very much. I'm sure a lot of, people have told you that, but your book, they are awesome. They do mean a lot to me, again, just because, that time with my wife on a cruise, I will always, remember that. And remember my wife going, why are you reading a book while we're in Cozumel, on vacation? So we're going into December on another cruise. And she said, you're going to be finished with that series by then, right? I need you to do stuff on the boat.
You better
So
be. You better be.
I,
Sounds like you're going to be
I
in
got to
trouble.
try. Yes, sir. I got to try. But again, I do appreciate it. I hope you do for your book tour, get to come down to Texas. And that way I can come by and see you, meet you, face to face, shake your hand, and hopefully get a book or two autographed. I'm
Absolutely. Like you got to think
definitely
about
gonna
coming
go.
up to Wyoming too. Like I think you'd like to probably have a look at those Bighorn Mountains. Like maybe sit down and have breakfast at the Busy Bee Cafe.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I'm gonna tell my wife, aside from Cheyenne, Frontier Days, we're gonna come to Longmire Days. That's the big one now. That just jumped above Frontier Days. But again, as always, I do appreciate you coming on, and speaking with me and agreeing to do this. Thank you so much, sir. I really do hope, you have a good Easter with you, your wife, and your family. And again, thank you so much.
You too, my friend. You
All
too.
right.
Be well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.